Avast, you scurvy dogs. Hey folks, it's Stefan here with some more Pathfinder Adventure Card Game, Skull and Shackles. Today we'll be tackling the Rum Punch scenario from the base adventure that comes in the box. Let's get started off with this scenario by reading the background. For many freedom-loving inhabitants of the Shackles, Caden Kalen is the only deity worth raising thanks and tankards to. Local Rum Punch festivals celebrate the god of freedom and another year of life and drink. It's a popular time to be in port, but also a dangerous one. My ship is anchored at the docks, we can see here. And flip this scenario card over. The villain of this scenario is Nefti Unwisha, and the henchmen are ruffians. During this scenario, when you close a location, you may attempt to acquire any allies left in that location deck. When you acquire an ally, put it in the ally pile next to this scenario card. Before you attempt a check to defeat Nefti Unwisha, you may put any number of allies from the ally pile into your hand. And the reward is to gain all the allies in the ally pile. So now let's take a look at the 4 locations in this scenario. The docks. This urban wilderness is as deadly as any jungle. The docks of many pirate ports teem with ambitious shysters, would-be stowaways, opportunistic thieves, imposter harbor masters, mangy parrots, crooks, evangelists, liars, and worse. Any sailor putting into port knows that dropping anchor doesn't guarantee safety, and it's best to go ashore with weapons drawn. And then we have the House of Stolen Kisses. The faithful of Callistria, goddess of lust, revenge, and trickery, maintain this temple in the Shackles. Here, the line between sanctuary and brothel blurs seamlessly. Its clergy use charm, seduction, and scandalous promises to collect both offerings and visitors' secrets. Those who visit the House of Stolen Kisses often leave, having revealed far more of themselves than they intended. The Safe House. With the constant threats of jilted pirate lords, hungry sea devils, tsunamis, and light-fingered capuchins, no place in the Shackles is truly safe, but this spot's as good as they come. And finally, the Ale House. The life of a pirate is a dangerous one, but even shorter and deadlier is the life of a pirate port barkeep. Buccaneers flush with booty and booze are far from a reasonable lot, and rumors of watered-down ale loom like the reaper over every tap room. As such, Shackles bartenders number among the best armed and most experienced sword swingers in the inner sea. As part of this scenario, our ship is anchored at the docks, which means that we actually cannot move the ship. So it's just going to be there. So we'll only be on the ship when we're actually at the docks. Okay, so we'll roll a d6 and look at the plunder table. And we got a 6, which says choose any of the above card types. I'm going to go with weapon. And we need to find, for Jarell, we need an ally because that's her preferred card type. No ally yet. There's an ally. So she's all set with her opening hand. That's 2 allies. And a rapier, so that's a good hand. Lyrianne needs a weapon, as it's her opening hand. So blessing of the gods is usually a good thing. An ally. The dragon pistol, so that's her weapon, so she's all set for her opening hand. Right, so an anchored ship cannot move during the scenario, so this ship was going to be here at the docks for the whole scenario. I'm just going to move this over so it's clear that that's really where it is. And let's flip the locations over and choose where we're going to start our adventures at. So the docks. After you explore, you may recharge an ally to immediately explore again, that's a good feature. When closing, bury an ally, so that's not too bad. We're not losing it completely. House of Stolen Kisses, when you acquire an ally, discard a card. You need to succeed at a Dexterity or Acrobatics 7 check. So Jarell's the better suited one for that. The Safe House. At the start of your turn, you may recharge a card to examine the top card of the location deck. Then you may shuffle it. When closing, you may close this location automatically, so that's a good one. And the Ale House. When you acquire an ally, you may recharge it and draw a card. Okay, so Well, I think that we'll both start off at the docks. We'll start as though the ship just landed. And to start off, taking the first card out of the blessings deck, it's a Blessing of Pharasma, which has to do with spells, and we're not going to be using spells for either Jarell or Lyrian. So Jarell will explore the location, and it is a pirate captain. Check to defeat combat 12. Human captain, pirate veteran. Before you act, recharge a card. Let's just toss the swab. I don't think he's probably going to help us all that much at the moment. Now back to the pirate captain. The difficulty of the check to defeat is increased by the adventure deck number of the current scenario, if any. Well, there isn't one. And you may not play allies that have the pirate trait on this check. Okay, so this guy's probably not going to help because he's a pirate. After you attack, the pirate captain deals 2 structural damage to your ship. Okay, so this is a fairly tough one. The combat 12. So we've got our rapier here, which gives us strength or melee, skill plus 2d4. And if we look on Jarell's powers, we can see that for your check that has or is against a card that has the finesse trait, you gain the skill. Melee is dexterity plus 2. This rapier, of course, does have the finesse trait. So we're going to use our d10 plus 2 and then 2d4. We're going to play a blessing on this because this is a little bit tougher fight, I think. So now it's 2d10 plus 2d4 plus 2. So go over and roll that. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we roll 12. So it's a good thing that we went with that because we got a 1 on one of those dice. But we defeat the captain. After you act, the pirate captain deals 2 structural damage to your ship. Jarell is able to reduce structural damage to your ship by 1, and Lyrian can play a card from her hand into the discard pile to prevent the other damage. So she will do that. So there's no damage happening to the ship, and the pirate captain goes away. And Jarell is going to reset her hand after that, because she's now down 2 cards. So we switch play to Lyrian, and the blessing she has drawn is the Blessing of Milani, which is discard this card to add 2 dice to any non-combat dexterity or wisdom check. Well, that's probably not going to come into play right now, but we'll see. Alright, it's another monster. The Swamp Ghoul. Check to defeat is combat 11. The Swamp Ghoul is immune to the mental and poison traits. If undefeated, bury the top card of your deck. Then reset your hand and end your turn. We're going to use the Dragon Pistol. For your combat check, reveal this card to use your dexterity or range skill plus 1d6. You may additionally bury this card to add another 2d6. A d8 plus 3 plus 1d6. So we're starting in a 5 to get an 11. Well, she's going to play her blessing to make that 2d8 plus d6 plus 3. So 1, 2, and 3. And that comes up at a 13. And then we add 3 to it, so that's a 16, and we defeat the Swamp Ghoul. If you do not bury this card, roll 1d6 or 1d12 if you are proficient with weapons. On a 1, shuffle this card back into your deck. Well, we are proficient with weapons, so we're going to roll just a d12 here. And anything but a 1 is good. So we get an 11. So we're going to keep that in our hand. Okay, so that's going to be the end of Lyrian's turn. She's just going to draw back up to her hand size of 4. She gets a buckler, so she's got some armor now. And some more armor in the form of leather armor. Pull the blessing for Jarell, and it's another blessing of Pharasma. We're just going to keep exploring. It's an anchor. Check to acquire Wisdom Survival 8. This is a tool. Display this card next to your character. When you would shuffle a non-villain monster into your location, you may place it on top of that location instead. At the start of each turn, roll 1d6. On a 1, bury this card. If you move, discard this card. It's odd. I'm not sure that it's of great benefit, but we have survival as a D8 plus 3, so let's see if we can acquire it. There's our D8, and we get a 7 plus 3 is 10, so we do acquire it. We'll put it over here next to her deck. And we have to remember to, at the start of each turn, roll 1d6. So she's going to use the effect that's on this location, the docks. After you explore, you may recharge an ally to immediately explore again. She'll recharge the boatswain and explore again. And we find a Besmaran Priest, which is an ally. Check to acquire Divine Charisma Diplomacy 6. Her charisma is a D8. The eye patch, I think, will help. Recharge this card to add 1d4 and the swashbuckling trait to your check to acquire an ally or defeat a bane or a ship, or 1d8 if it has a pirate trait. So if we recharge this, that's going to make it our check to acquire a 2d8. So let's definitely do that, because we do need allies in this scenario. So it's 1, 2, and we get 9 total, and we only needed 6, so we acquire the Besmaran Priest. Now we go back up to the scenario, and you will remember that when you acquire an ally, put it in an ally pile next to this scenario card. So we've acquired her, but she's going to go into this deck up here now. And that's going to be useful when fighting the villain later. So she'll reset her hand, gets a Blessing of the Gods, and another ally. Play goes to Lyrian, and she has the Blessing of Achakek. Discard this card to add 2 dice to any check to defeat a villain or henchman. That's really good if she had a Blessing of the Gods, which she does not. But it's not a villain or a henchman anyway, it's a weapon, a dagger. Check to acquire is a dexterity or range 3, but she actually can't fail that check because her ranged is a dexterity plus 3, so that just automatically goes to her hand. For your combat check, reveal this card to use your dexterity or range skill plus 1d4. You may additionally recharge this card to add another 1d4. When playing another weapon, you may discard this card to add 1d4 to a combat check. So it's actually not a bad thing. Now she's over her hand size, and she doesn't have a way to explore again. So she's going to have to discard something. And I think we'll discard the buckler. Now we're going to switch back over to Jirel. And it is a barrier. An illusory wall. Check to defeat Intelligence, Arcane, Wisdom, Perception 6. The difficulty to defeat this barrier is increased by the adventure deck number of the current scenario, if any, there isn't one. If defeated, examine the top card of the location deck and return it to either the top or the bottom of the deck. Well, she has a wisdom of D8, so we have a chance at this. Let's clear this out, hit D8, and we get a 3, which is not enough. But this is just an illusory wall, so nothing happens here. This goes back into the barriers deck. No negative effect from that card. She's again going to use the effect on the location. After you explore, you may recharge an ally to immediately explore again. And recharge our Master at Arms. And it is a Tot Flask. Check to acquire Intelligence Craft 6. When you would banish an item that has the alchemical or liquid trait for its power, reveal this card to bury that item instead of banishing it. So it basically lets you keep a potion from one game to the next, because normally they would just be banished to the box. Her intelligence, however, is a D4, so there's no way she can acquire this without using a blessing, and I don't think that this card is worthwhile at the moment, since I don't have any potions. So that'll be the end of her turn, and she will reset. And she gets a Spyglass, which will come in handy next time. Back over to Lyrian. She gets a Blessing of Gorham, which is discard to add 2 dice to any combat strength check, which isn't going to help because she uses dexterity for combat. And so we're getting down to the bottom of the deck here. Onyx of Constitution. Check to acquire Constitution 7. She has a D6, so she can't acquire this without a blessing. So we're just going to send that back to the box. And now switching back to Jarell, she'll explore. The henchman's either going to be here, or, I mean, it could be, well, it's a chain shirt. So either the henchman or the villain is the next card in this deck. Check to acquire the chain shirt is a Constitution Fortitude 4, and she has a Fortitude of a Constitution +2. So we only need to get a 2 or higher on a D6 to acquire. And we get a 6. So we acquire the chain shirt. We also don't need 2 rapiers. So let's discard a rapier. Switch play back over to Lirian. And she is either going to encounter the henchman or a henchman or the villain. And it's a henchman. It's a ruffian. Check to defeat is a combat 7. The difficulty to defeat is increased by the adventure deck number of the current scenario, if any. There isn't one. After you act, if your check to defeat did not have the swashbuckling trait, bury one item or weapon of your choice from your discard pile. So we'll use the dragon pistol, and that is going to be our dexterity range plus 1d6. We're going to use the effect on the dagger as well. When playing another weapon, you may discard this to add 1d4. So we're going to have 1d8, 1d6, 1d4, plus 3. d8, d6, d4. And we roll 13, which is more than enough to defeat the ruffian. So after you act, if your check did not have the swashbuckling trait, bury one item or weapon of your choice from your discard pile. So we'll just bury the dagger, which we just used, because that wasn't in our deck to begin with anyway, so it's not a loss. Now I need to resolve the effect here with the dragon pistol, so I need to roll a d12 to see if this gets shuffled into the deck. Anything but a 1. So we get a 2, and it does not go into the deck. And now we can attempt to close the location. Unfortunately, we do not have an ally to bury, so the location stays open. We'll reset Lirian's hand. There's the pistol. Yes, in fact, the base pistol does have the swashbuckling trait. Our play goes back to Jarell, who gets a blessing of Aristil, which is a great blessing to have. Discard to add 2 dice to any combat dexterity check. However, that's not going to come into play at the moment. Unfortunately, she doesn't have an ally in hand either. So she has no way to close this location. So I think what she will do is move on to the safe house. So she's leaving the ship at this point. Remember, the ship is docked. And she moves over to the safe house. At the start of your turn, you may recharge a card to examine the top card of the location deck, then you may shuffle it. But we didn't start our turn here, so this doesn't come into play. But she can still explore, and she finds another ally. In this case, a sailor. Discard to add 1d4 to your check when you are on a ship. Okay. Well, it's a Charisma Diplomacy 6. And she has a d8 for Charisma. So there's a d8 coming out. And we get a 3. So we do not acquire this ally. She doesn't have a way to... Well, she could explore again with her Blessing of the Gods, and actually, it's probably worthwhile to do so. So she will explore again. Because remember, we're operating against the Blessings deck, which is a timer for the game. Okay, it's a barrier. Barroom Brawl. Check to defeat, Strength, Melee, Dexterity 5. The difficulty to defeat this barrier is increased by the adventure deck number of the current scenario, if any, there isn't one. Each character at this location encounters this barrier. Each character that does not defeat the barrier is dealt 1 plus the adventure deck number, if any, in combat damage. If any character defeats the barrier, is defeated. So we're basically having a fight in a bar, and we've got a Strength, Melee, Dexterity 5, so she's got a Dex of D10, so we need a D10. We need better than a 5, and a 1 is not going to do it, so we are going to take 1 point of damage. However, we have 2 pieces of armor. Recharge this card to reduce combat damage dealt to you by 1, or recharge this card to reduce combat damage dealt to you by 2. If you're proficient with light armors, you may reveal this card instead, which we are, so we'll just use that effect. We got a card cleared out of that location. She's going to reset her hand, and play goes back to Lyrian. Still no ally, so Lyrian is going to move on as well. However, she's going to go to the House of Stolen Kisses and explore here. And she finds an old salt. The check to acquire is a Charisma Diplomacy 7. Her Charisma is only a D6, so she won't be able to acquire the old salt. Take another card from the Blessings deck, and the play returns to Jarell, who's here at the safe house. And it's another ally, Master at Arms, Charisma Diplomacy 8. Well, she has a D8, it is possible. We'll use the Blessing on this, so that's going to be 2d8 to acquire the Master at Arms. It's 1, 2. And we get a 9, so we do acquire the Master at Arms. However, as you recall, when we acquire an ally, that goes into the ally pile here next to the scenario card. So we don't actually bring it into our hand, unfortunately, because we could use that to close that location. And that's going to be the end of Jarell's turn. She doesn't have anything else she can do. So we'll pull another card off the Blessings deck. It's another Blessing of Aristil. And this play goes back to Lyrian. And it's the Ruffian. So it's the henchman at this location. As we've already looked, there is no adventure deck number, so we don't have to increase his difficulty. This time we have a weapon that would give us the swashbuckling trait, so we can avoid that other effect that he has. So let's see what her combat will look like. For your combat check, reveal this card to use your dexterity or range skill plus 1d6. You may additionally bury this card to add another 1d10. Well, we don't want to bury it, because for starters, we don't want to use cards in that way if we don't have to. So we're just going to use our dexterity ranged, which is d8 plus 3, plus 1d6. So we're starting at a 5 to get a 7. Clear this, d8, d6, and that's 9 already without the plus 3. So we defeat him. So now we have to resolve the effect for our pistol to make sure it stays in our hand. If you did not bury this card, roll a 1d6 or 1d12 if you are proficient with weapons, as we are. On a 1 to 2, shuffle this card into your deck. So anything other than a 1 or a 2 keeps the card in our hand. And we get a 3. So that's good. Keep that. And now we may immediately attempt to close this location. We have to succeed at a dexterity or acrobatics 7 check. Well, her dexterity is a d8, and she doesn't have acrobatics. So it would be quite difficult to make a 7 check. However, Jarell has a blessing, and she's going to play that blessing. So now Lyrian's check is going to be 2d8 to close this location. And let's hope that we do so. We get a 10 combined on those, so we do close this. On closing, add a random card from your discard pile to your hand. So that's a nice little bonus. That's like getting health back, basically. So we'll shuffle this around and flip it over and pull a card off and flip it back over. And this goes to my hand. It's an ally. We'll have to resolve that in just a moment, but this is now closed, and that leaves 8 cards in the deck. Now we know that the villain cannot be in this deck because we haven't encountered the villain and he can't move around. But let's just look and see, because we do have the option, as you remember from the scenario, when you close a location, you may attempt to acquire any allies left in the location deck. So So that's not an ally. That's not an ally. This is an ally. The Lookout. Charisma Diplomacy 6. Well, we've got a D6 charisma, so we'll roll it. And we got a 5. So we did not acquire the Lookout. Okay, this is an ally. The Boatswain. He's a Charisma Diplomacy 9. There's no way we're getting that. So he's going to go back in the box. This is a spell. Here's another ally, a Dolphin. Wisdom Survival 8. Well, our Wisdom is a D12, so we have a better chance of getting the Dolphin. Except that we rolled a 6. So we do not acquire the Dolphin either. There's another barrier. Another spell. So no, we didn't acquire anything out of that. Anything extra. But that's a location closed and one that's almost closed. And just putting these cards back in their decks. So this is Larry Ann's turn. So she now needs to get her hand size down to only 4 cards because that's her maximum. So we're actually going to discard the pistol. Draw from the Blessings deck, switch this back over, it goes to Jarrell, who's still here at the safe house. At the start of your turn, you may recharge a card to examine the top card of the location deck, then you may shuffle it. So let's do that. Let's recharge our armor here, which actually is an acquisition into our deck that we didn't start with. And we're going to examine the top card of the location deck. And it happens to be the Henchman. It's a ruffian. You can examine it, then you may shuffle it. So actually this actually has kind of a bad effect because the ruffian was going to be right there on top and now we don't know where he's going to be. He could still come back up on top. Probably won't though. Okay, so we'll examine the card. And this time it is a wooden shield. Check to acquire Constitution Fortitude of 4. So I've got a Fortitude as a Constitution +2, and my Constitution is a D6. So we need a 2 or higher. We get a 2, so we do acquire the wooden shield. We don't have a way to explore again. However, we could use the Spyglass to examine the top 2 cards of your location deck and put them back in any order. I think we will do that because this will help us move through the deck. So we'll take the top 2 cards off. And the ruffian is back on top. So then the question is, do we want to put the captain above? Because that's an ally that we would potentially like to acquire. I think we will. So we'll put the ruffian 1 card below the captain, which would give us a chance to potentially acquire another ally before we close that location. She's going to reset her hand and gets another weapon. I just want to check something here. You can close this location automatically, so we don't even have any special effect to close the safe house, which is really great. Now, Larry Ann doesn't have a good chance of acquiring that captain because one of the checks was a charisma, and she only has a D6. So Larry Ann's going to go elsewhere. She's going to go back over to the docks so that we can close this. So she moves to the docks. She does a closing check, which is just bury an ally. So we bury this guy. And when permanent on closing, you may examine the top card of any location deck. If it is a boon, put it into your hand. Add it into your hand. So we're going to take the top card from the alehouse, which we haven't been to yet. See what that is. It's not a boon. It is a ghost, which is really a problem because we need magic in order to defeat this guy. If you look down in his power section, he's immune to mental and poison traits. If the check to defeat does not have the magic trait, the ghost is undefeated. So it's not a boon, which means it goes back onto the top of the deck. So we know there's a ghost there. Jarell does have a magic weapon, but she doesn't have it in her hand at the moment. Lyrian doesn't have any form of magic weapon, but this is another location closed, so that's still very good. And we're halfway through the Blessings deck. We're just halfway through the timer. Oh, and Lyrian's hand would have been reset. She gets a potion of glibness, which would actually help with a diplomacy check. Wasn't there a location that required a diplomacy check? No, I guess not. Anyway, we're back to Jarell. We know that this is the pirate captain. Or just captain. Now, there's 2 checks here. Check to acquire Constitution Fortitude 4, then a Charisma Diplomacy 6. So she has to make both checks in order to acquire this captain. Constitution Fortitude is a d6 plus 2 for us. So roll a d6. Gonna get better than 2, we do. So then we go on to Charisma Diplomacy 6. She has a d8 for Charisma. Now, she has a blessing that she could use to help with that roll. So we're just going to take our chances on the d8 and hope that we get better than a 6. Or 6 or better, and we do not. We get a 2. So we didn't acquire the captain. We still know that we have the villain here, which is going to give us a chance to close. So that will be the end of Jarell's turn, and we'll switch back to Lyrian. She's going to now move over here to this location because she knows she can take out a ruffian pretty easily. And unfortunately, again, we're not going to have the swashbuckling trait. But that's not a big deal. We're going to use the dragon pistol, so it's a d8 plus a d6 plus 3 for us. d8 plus 6, so it's starting at a 5 to get a 7. d8, d6, and we get a 6, plus 3 is 9, which beats the ruffian. You'll notice here this location closes automatically, so we don't have to do anything special. It just closes, there's no sort of check. We do, however, have to resolve our check for the dragon pistol to see if that has to be shuffled back into the deck. We need to roll a 1d12, and if we roll a 1, it goes back into the deck. And we do roll a 1, unfortunately. So this gets shuffled back into the deck. I'll shuffle this. This is a good time to use our powder horn. Discard this card to search your deck for a weapon that has a firearm trait, add it to your hand, and shuffle your deck. After playing this card, succeed. Well, we don't have the craft check, so we can't keep it. It's definitely going to just be discarded. Let's take this over here so that we don't end up combining cards. And of course, we can just take the dragon pistol that we put back in the deck, and that's the one we want because that's our best weapon. Alright, and then we have the when permanently closed, any character at another location may banish a card to evade an encounter and move here, then reset her hand turn. Okay, so that doesn't really come into play here, but it is happening all the time now. So let's see if there are any other allies in here. This is not an ally. This is not an ally. This is armor. It's another magic buckler. This is not an ally. That's another armor. And finally, this is not an ally. I suppose maybe there were no allies in this deck. That's the end of Lyrian's turn. We'll reset her hand. And she gets an ally. It's actually going to be good. Blessing of Pharasma here for Jarell's turn. Jarell's going to move to the only other open location, the only other location that there is. However, as we remember, there's a ghost at this location, and requires the magic trait to defeat. We can still beat him in combat, and it would send him back into the deck. So I think what she is going to do is reset her hand. She's going to basically do nothing on her turn. We're going to drop... Well, let's see which is better. The Cutlass is strength or melee plus 1d6. This is 2d4. It's a tough call, I guess. we're going to discard the Cutlass. This allows us to draw 2 cards. And that's the one we wanted right there, the Cutlass +1. For your combat check, reveal this card to use your strength or melee plus 1d6 +1, but you'll notice that it has the magic trait, and that's the part that we need to be able to fight that Spectre. So that's the end of her turn. This is the last location, so we know the villain is in this location, because we've already encountered all the henchmen. Valyrion's going to move over. Now they're both here. Now she doesn't have a magic weapon, so she's not going to do anything for her turn, except potentially use the lookout. Well, there's no point. We know what that is. She'll save that for a future turn. So it's going to switch back over to Jarrell. And this time we get a blessing of Caden Kalen, which is appropriate for the alehouse. Discard this card to add 2 dice to any non-combat strength or constitution check. Well, I don't think that's going to come into play since we know for sure we're fighting a ghost. And here is the ghost. He's a combat 12 or wisdom divine 8. So if you happen to be a magic wielder or a healer or something that's good against the undead, you might use your wisdom divine check. We're not going to. We're going to want to stick with a combat check. So that for us is going to be a just a d10 plus 2 from our power plus a d6 plus 1. So that's a d10, a d6 plus 3 to get a 12. So that's starting at a 5 to get a 12. It's not solid, so I'm going to use a blessing. That's going to give us now 2d10, a d6 plus 3. So 1, 2, 3. We got 16 already, so we've defeated him. We do have the magic trait, so he is truly defeated. And he goes back into the box. Well, she only has 4 cards in her deck, which is a little bit dangerous because she has a hand size of 5. So we're going to switch back over to Lyrian. We still have plenty of cards in the Blessings deck. We're not in any rush here. We're going to use the Lookout ability. Recharge this card to examine the top card of your location deck. We want to try to find the villain. Well, in fact, there's the villain right there. Nefti Onwisha monster. Check to defeat is a Charisma Diplomacy 13, and this would be a big problem for Lyrian, who only has a Charisma of D6. But we're only examining the top card. We don't have to make the choice of actually encountering the top card. So this is going to go back into our deck. That was recharged. However, she can succeed at a diplomacy check with a potion of glibness. So actually, it turns out that Lyrian is the proper person to encounter this card. So we're going to pull that card off there. We know it's the villain. The check to defeat is a Charisma Diplomacy 13. Before you act, choose a card from your hand and shuffle it into a random open location deck. Well, this is the only location deck that's open. You may reveal any number of allies. For each ally revealed, add 1 to your check to defeat. However, we are just going to use a potion of glibness, banish this card, and choose a character at your location to succeed at a diplomacy check. It doesn't provide a number on there, so it's an automatic success. We just outright defeat her. Well done, Jarrell and Lyrian. Gain all the allies in the ally pile. That's our reward for doing this. So we only got 2, and I think they're both basic, so we could have pulled them from the box anyway. He's basic, and actually the Besmaran Priest is not basic. So this might be a card that we would want to consider keeping in one of our decks, replacing an existing ally. Possibly that's Swab, because he didn't seem that useful anyway. Recharge this card to add 1d6 to your non-combat wisdom or charisma check. That would have been quite useful here because we were trying to do these diplomacy or charisma checks. Discard this card to explore your location. Add the swashbuckling trait to your non-combat checks during this exploration. Yeah, and the ability to add that 1d6 for a recharge effect is great, much better than a discard. So we're definitely going to want to keep that Besmaran Priest. The Master at Arms, possibly not. We already have one in Jarrell's deck, and like I said, we could just add one of these in anyway. It's not useful for Larion because it's a melee combat check, and we wouldn't be doing that. We would be doing a ranged check. So I don't think we'll keep him, but we're definitely going to want to keep that Besmarn Priest. Okay, that was the effect of Rum Punch, and that's the completion of Rum Punch. We get to find out what the card is, what is the plunder card under our ship. And it turns out to be a belaying pin. And for your combat check, reveal this card to use your strength or melee skill plus 1d4. You may additionally discard this card to add your strength die. It's not great for either of these. I mean, Jarell could use it, but her strength is only d6. She's much better using a dex weapon. So we're just going to put that back in the box. We don't really care about that. Well, that's the end of the Rum Punch scenario. A great success for Jarell and Larion. And thanks so much for tuning in.